who had a 15-year-long affair with a woman almost 40 years younger than him. They did end up getting married, though. Well, today I want to tell you about a marvelous English composer by the name of Ralph Vaughan Williams. Williams was born in 1872 in the village of Down Ampney in the vicarage, where his father was a reverend. His mother was from the Darwin family. Actually, Charles Darwin was his great uncle, and he grew up in a family where thinking was cherished and very much encouraged. Skepticism was as well. Sadly, as many of the composers I've talked about, by the time he was a little over two, his father died. So he and his mom, they moved back to his mother's town where she came from. When he was still very young, he started playing piano, and then he also started studying violin as well. He wasn't being pushed for as a child prodigy. He was just told to think before he performed because he came from a family where thinking was more important than anything else. Later on, after his primary school, he went to the Royal College of Music where he studied composition. He was good at it, he enjoyed it, but he knew he wanted more. He felt like he was getting very good at composing and but he felt like it was other people's voice. He later went to Berlin for a little bit to study, then he went to Paris, and he actually studied under Maurice Ravel. And this did help him, but he kept searching for his own voice. Ralph Vaughan Williams deeply believed that music should be for everyone, not just the few elite that could go to a concert hall and buy fancy tickets. He wanted music of the people for the people, including classical music. And so he went out and he started listening to folk music a lot. He started putting what he heard into his composition, never directly quoting a line of music. It was more of an inspiration. It was more like he absorbed the language of folk music and started putting it into his own classical music. As I said, he believed that music should be for everyone, and this idea of musical democracy was best seen in 1906 when he was put on a committee, to redo the English hymnal. He took out everything, he stripped out everything that he thought was like Victorian and formal, snooty, and he replaced it with things that were singable for everyone, regardless if you had training or not. He wanted all the music to be attainable for anyone that wanted it. When it came to the hymnal, it wasn't about being great. It wasn't about being perfect. He said the music wasn't about a performance, especially not in the church. And remember, his father was a reverend. And so he understood that it wasn't about the music in the church. And for him, it was more about participation. So he wanted to write the music clear lines, using a lot of folk inspiration, a lot of lines inspired by folk music again, so everyone could participate loudly and boldly. He met a nice lady named Adeline Fisher. They hit it off. He was in his early 20s. He was studying at Cambridge, and he proposed to her, and they got married right before his 25th birthday. For many years, their marriage was great and wonderful, and they were very devoted to each other. They loved each other dearly, but she suffered from severe progressive arthritis, and it slowly started disabling her until she was basically housebound for many, many years. Now, Vaughan Williams remained loyal in her care. He stayed with her until she passed away a long, long time later. So he was there for her physically, and he was very kind to her, but emotionally, I would say he was kind of checked out. In 1938, he met another girl named Ursula Wood. And I'm saying girl because she was very young. I mean, very young. He was 65, she was 27. He was married, and so was she. But they bonded. They bonded over their work. She was a poet. She was a theater person. And she was very helpful to him, and she inspired him, and they colluded a lot together, work-wise, but also in other ways. And this ended up being an emotional affair, and then just a full-on affair for many, many, many years. Actually, at the very end, when his first wife was very ill at home, she was there helping her. Anyway, this affair was discreet, but very meaningful, very intense. And his partner passed away 2 years after his wife died. They got married. At this point, he was 80 years old. He participated in World War I, and any romantic notion someone might have of war was definitely left. He had held different positions. After this, it did change his music. We do not hear a lot of anger. We hear grief. We hear it was even more looking inward and beauty of it all. During the Second World War, which he also experienced, he was not participating. He was elderly at this point. but he continued to compose and he was helping out. He supported a lot of things during and after the war, including like women's rights, workers' education. He really wanted to broaden the access to the arts for everyone. It was so difficult for him to think that art was only for the elite, in fancy museums, and he wanted it for everybody. He was offered knighthood and he actually refused this, which completely makes sense with who he is, because he was going to reject social hierarchy, right? That's everything he did. But what he did not reject was the Order of Merit. This was based on like what you did instead of like a hierarchical place. Ralph Vaughan Williams was not in any way a child prodigy. He was very musical. He was very talented, but it took him many years to get to where he was. He was, and when he was little, he was just practicing some his own music, and then he went to conservatory. He started composing, but he wasn't making his money that way. He was a teacher, and he made his music teacher. He was an organist at different places. He helped with the hymnal, and that helped also with his, getting his name out. He was a music editor. He was an arranger. He did a lot of work. He continued to compose, but he wasn't putting out a lot. He was still trying to find his voice, but also just people. It wasn't anything people were really latching onto right away. It wasn't until 1910 when he wrote a music piece called Fantasia on a theme of Thomas Tallis, and this people really enjoyed, and he started getting his name out, and people started recognizing who he was. And after that, so not until his 30s was he starting to be recognized. His music is so beautiful and just pulls your heartstrings. It is, and I do think it's distinctly English. It reminds me of Finzi and Way, who came later, but it's similar. So I can see that they both have the same roots. He did write every kind of music out there. Of course he did, because he wanted it to be attainable by everybody. But he wrote symphonies, but he also wrote folk-inspired music. He wrote choral music. He wrote hymns. He even wrote an opera. He wrote film music and radio music later on in his life. And he continued to compose in his 80s. In 1958, at the age of 85, he passed away. He was quietly buried in Westminster Abbey with some of England's greatest artists. There wasn't a big fanfare. There wasn't like any grandeur, just like he would have liked it. Exactly how he lived. So much of his music is so beautiful. I would say The Lark Ascending might be one of my favorites, but go listen to some Ralph Vaughan Williams. It's all lovely.